What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Flying Knee KO podcast, episode number 13. My name is Victor Vasquez, and today we are going to be discussing this past UFC's pay-per-view card, which is headlined by Khabib Nurmagomedov against Justin the Highlight Gaethje. And, my goodness, I mean, I know I'm always using a lot of hyperbole when I'm talking about these cards, when I jump into these, segments to talk about UFC and the fight nights and the different types of events and crazy knockouts that occur. But let me just tell you that, to me, this main card, just the main card, the 6 fights that were included in that pay-per-view, this probably is the best main card of 2020. It was just back-to-back-to-back finishes. Of all 6 fights, they were all finishes within 2 rounds, besides the co-main event, which we will be discussing later on in a different segment. But man, what an incredible night of fights in Abu Dhabi. It was a weird time frame. I had to watch it on replay because I was a little bit busy on Saturday. But my goodness, what an incredible night of action for these fighters that I just can't wait to talk about it, guys. So let's just jump in. The first segment is actually called...
I'm here with the winner, Derek Lewis. Derek, why'd you take your pants off? My balls was hot. I understand.
That was Derek Lewis saying his balls were hot, and that's what the name of the segment is, Hot Balls segment, where we try to pull out specific items, specific fights or fighters, even news that really just came out as the hottest take of the past weekend of fights. And you can't go anywhere, you can't start or finish without talking about Khabib Nurmagomedov. Congratulations to him. He ended up defending his title for the 3rd time already in the UFC after he finished Justin Gaethje in the second round via a triangle choke. My goodness, what a transition that he was able to pull off. And again, it's just another stellar performance by Khabib Nurmagomedov. And that's not even the hot news. That's not even the biggest reason. It's actually what happens after he won, after he was announced by Bruce Buffer as the champion. And still, he ends up taking off his gloves and he announces to the world that he's actually going to retire from the UFC and from competing in MMA. And I think everybody was just caught off guard. It seemed like, his team might have known, maybe his coaches. It's not really clear on who exactly knew, but from the fact that, as soon as he took off his gloves after he finished the fight, and even before that, he was in tears as soon as he got that victory, ended up, pointing to the skies up above and then just went right to his knees and started just bawling his eyes out. You could just see the emotion pour out of him. And you can't fault him, man. You gotta feel for Khabib. He ended up losing his father this year, a guy that basically was his hero, his mentor up until this point in the stage of his career. He taught him everything he knew about MMA. And not only has he had a huge influence on Khabib's career, he's had a huge influence on multiple different Dagestani fighters and Russian fighters that have made it either to the UFC or other MMA organizations. So there's nothing else you can say about Khabib than, you feel for the guy. I mean, that makes the retirement much more understandable, at least from our point of view. For a lot of different individuals or fans that have watched the sport, you see a guy in his physical prime. He's only getting better, and now it's just calling it quits as a career. And he ends up saying why. He said that he was hoping to try to get to 30-0. That's what his dad wanted him to do, a goal that they've both discussed. But it was actually his mom, Khabib's mom, actually letting him know that, doesn't think it's a good idea that he should continue his career and fighting without his father. And Khabib had to kind of convince her a little bit, just let her know, hey, I need to win this one match. This is an agreement that I made to the UFC, and I wanted to finish this off. But I promise you that after this fight against Justin Gaethje, this will be the last fight of my career. And, a lot of UFC fighters retire. You see guys like Henry Cejudo, who just retired this year, Daniel Cormier, who just retired. Conor's retired like 3 or 4 times in his career. But when you see Khabib say it, and and especially if you've been a fan of his, you kind of have seen him fight over the last couple of years, the type of respect that he has for this sport, and for not only this sport, for the fans and for all of his coaches and the staff that kind of helps him out. This man, you believe every word that this guy says, and he, I believe him. I know that this is going to that is the last time we will probably see Khabib Nurmagomedov. I said probably again. Again, because you never know, never say never. But when a guy like that who just sticks so much to his word, he's just always been so respectful. Congratulations to Khabib, and it's very bittersweet. On the one hand, and I'm gonna be honest, I loved seeing him fight. In my head, I'm always like, okay, can somebody get close? But never really wanting to see him actually lose his undefeated record. But I wanted to see somebody get close. We saw Conor try, didn't get close. You saw Dustin Poirier in their last matchup. He had no chance. And now Justin Gaethje, in the promos, you're thinking, man, this guy, if he lands one punch, it could be over. But he landed several punches. He landed a lot of good leg kicks to Khabib. And that just did not stop the freight train that is Khabib Nurmagomedov. So there's so many different things that you can say about him. And I'm pretty sure different, outlets will say how much of a superstar this guy was. He is the GOAT of the lightweight division, or even some considering the GOAT of MMA. I'm more down the line of kind of considering a whole group of individuals that can be the GOAT. That just can't be one singular person. I feel like it's a culmination of different athletes for this sport. But he's for sure the greatest lightweight of all time. And it was just an honor to kind of see him fight and get that victory over Justin Gaethje. Let's kind of get into it. In the first round, Justin Gaethje seemed to kind of keep his distance against Khabib. He was landing some nice leg kicks to the lead leg of Khabib, but Khabib did not stop pressuring Justin Gaethje. Kept walking up to him, trying to pressure him along the cage. Attempted a few takedowns, and Justin did a really good job stuffing the first couple of takedowns. But just like Khabib said leading up to fight week, he was mentioning, hey, some fighters can't wrestle. They can't do takedowns 25 minutes. I'm going to do as many takedowns as I want. I'll go up for 100 if I have to, because I know if I land that one nice takedown, take him to the ground, I'm going to maul him. And, he almost had it in the first round. I mean, in my eyes, I thought Justin was leaning towards winning that round. And then at the end, probably like the last 30 seconds, Khabib gets the takedown, gets into a nice little position where he's able to get into a nice arm bar. And as soon as he tries to pull that away, the bell rings and the first round ends. But Khabib was that close to ending it in the first round. After kind of going into that, first round, you're starting to think, okay, how tired is Justin Gaethje? Is he going to be able to handle this constant pressure? Can he even make it to 5 rounds? Well, we didn't even get to know that, because as soon as the second round started, you could see, okay, the leg kicks again working. But now you start seeing Justin Gaethje breathe a little bit harder than he was in the first round. And then once more, Khabib goes for the takedown, gets into a nice position, and now he ends up getting a full mount as soon as he gets the back of Justin Gaethje. He ends up getting a body lock from the back, then immediately gets him to the floor, transitions over to top position and full mount. Then instead of going for the armbar again, he ends up getting a triangle choke. Then he kind of pulls Justin right around and then ends up sleeping Justin Gaethje. Jason Herzog, the referee, actually didn't see that Justin Gaethje tapped about 2 times, but it was just too quick and he did not see it. So then Justin Gaethje was out cold. Luckily for him, he did get up very quickly, and he was a good sport. As soon as Khabib was in the center of the cage, letting out his emotions, he went right over, kind of tapped on the back, and both guys shook hands. A lot of respect between these two guys, but another masterful performance by Khabib Nurmagomedov. And he just cements his legacy. And that's where you start discussing, okay, where does he rank? Is he the greatest of all time? A lot of people are going to start debating that in the next couple of months. Now that, he's probably never going to come back to the sport. Again, I always say probably, even though in my head I feel like, he's not coming back. But never say never. You see, like I mentioned, a lot of guys. Henry Cejudo recently just retired from the UFC. And now he's saying that, if for the right price, I'm willing to come back. But Khabib is a much different guy than Henry Cejudo. He does not need a price to come back. All he wants is to be competitive and be the most dominant UFC fighter of all time. And I think he succeeded in that. He was asking after the fight that he wanted to be the number 1 ranked pound for pound fighter. He felt like he was trying to strive for that one goal. He was already champion. So the next real goal for him was to be ranked number 1. Currently in that spot was John Jones. And a lot of people immediately, yep, I accept it. I feel like he is the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the UFC. Khabib is. And I wouldn't deny that either. I feel like he didn't need to say that. He didn't, I feel like athletes don't need to really say, hey, I deserve to have this. I deserve to have that. To me, let the individuals or let the critics or the media kind of come in and to tell you where you belong to be. But to me, he was already the most dominant fighter. He was already the most skilled lightweight in that UFC lightweight division. But just wanted to congratulate again Khabib Nurmagomedov for defending his lightweight title for the third time. He actually ended up finishing his opponents faster and faster over the past 3 fights. Against McGregor, ended up beating McGregor in the 4th round via a submission where he was able to almost break his jaw if McGregor didn't tap. Next fight was against Dustin, ended up finishing him by rear naked choke in the 3rd round. And then now Justin Gaethje, another great contender, finishes him in the 2nd round. So he was just improving his skills as he went along. So it's going to suck not seeing him in the UFC anymore, but I congratulate Khabib Nurmagomedov, who cemented his legacy as one of the greatest fighters and somebody you need to include when you're talking about the history of the UFC and history of MMA as well. All right, guys, that was the Hot Balls segment, mostly just discussing about Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now I want to talk about my favorite fight of the night in the segment that I like to call...
Let me bang, man. I want to do that, man. I do.
Let Me Bang, Bro by Julian Lane. This is really the segment where I like to choose a fight where I see 2 ladies or 2 gentlemen just bang it out in the cage, or very competitive fight as well. And the fight that I ended up going with was Robert Whittaker versus Jared Cannonier. That was the co-main event and the only fight on the main card that ended up not being stopped by a finish. Now, that does not mean that one of these guys wasn't close. Robert Whittaker in the 3rd round landed a nice combination where he ended up throwing a straight right into a nice high right leg kick that landed flush on the dome of Jared Cannonier and ended up stumbling him. That was really the closest that fight got really to being finished, but Cannonier, just being a tough guy that he is, ended up withstanding all the damage, even got back up and had a chance to change and shift the momentum. So let's go ahead and kind of discuss why I chose this one. Really, the stakes that were involved with this fight. Before coming in, this is really considered a number 1 contender fight. You have Robert Whittaker, the former champion, who had just, off the heels of beating Darren Till, who just, again, moved up into that middleweight division, facing off against Jared Cannonier, who was actually considered the dark horse by the champion of the middleweight division, Israel, the Last Stylebender Adesanya. So just kind of going through that storyline, both guys knew what they had to do. They knew the game plan, and they knew that if they got the result that they were looking for, they had that next shot against Izzy. So both guys coming in super aggressive. And what was really the big factor and what helped Robert Whittaker kind of starting off this fight is the lead jab. Lead jab just helped him set up so many different combinations, like the one I mentioned as well, that ended up rocking Jared Cannonier. But in the 1st round, Robert has this nice little stance, almost like a karate stance, where he keeps his hands very low. But that lead hand, the left hand for him, is just really below the waist, almost either at the waist level or below. And the way he just is able to just pop that left hand straight at the chin and the jaw of Jared Cannonier, it was just working like so damn beautiful. And again, like I mentioned, when Jared Cannonier just couldn't time that as well, he just either had to anticipate, okay, when is that lead jab coming? And what else is going to come after he lands that lead jab? And what am I going to have to do? Am I going to have to block my body from a leg kick? Or is it going to come up to the head? Or is it going to throw a leg kick down low? So many different things and combinations that Robert Whittaker could do. And it was all because of that lead jab. Now, I kind of teased it a little bit earlier in this segment, but the knockdown was really the key for Robert Whittaker. He was very close 1st and 2nd round. He still could lean more towards Whittaker. But that 3rd round, it was clear that Whittaker was just on a roll. That lead jab again working, throwing the nice right hand as well. Sometimes he would throw that straight right without even loading up or without even having the lead jab setting it up for him. And then because of those combinations, because of the mystery that was involved with the offense of Robert Whittaker, Jared Cannonier had no clue what was coming. And that's what happened. He threw that straight right that went right through the guard of Jared Cannonier. And that's where you just see that nice little high kick with the right leg of Robert Whittaker that lands on Jared Cannonier. Ends up kind of stunning him. He ends up going right against the cage, almost falls over. And then you can see, like a shark who smells blood, Robert Whittaker running down, trying to finish it off. He was landing some nice ground and pound, but again, Cannonier doing a really good job to cover up. He still had his senses with him, and he found a way to get back onto his feet. Now, it wasn't all one-sided in that third round. Jared, in the last minute of that fight, ended up landing a nice overhand right that ended up actually stunning Robert Whittaker. It kind of slowed him down, and then you could start seeing Robert Whittaker, all right, I need to calm down. I need to take control of this last couple of seconds. It started clinching up with Jared Cannonier, but Cannonier almost had another opportunity to land a uppercut as well as several other punches that could have changed this fight. Would have been one of the craziest comebacks of all time in the UFC, but ends up going all 3 rounds. Great co-main event. Jared Cannonier also had his moments early on in the first couple of rounds. He was doing really well with his leg kicks, trying to kick out, mess up the lead leg of Robert Whittaker, but he just kind of stayed away from that game plan in the second, and then the third round, he didn't see any more leg kicks. So we'll have to wonder why that game plan changed, but ended up going to the decision and in favor of Robert Whittaker. So he basically got, I believe it was 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. So congratulations to Robert Whittaker and Jared Cannonier for being featured on the Let Me Bang Bro segment. But more congratulations to Robert Whittaker, who now, there's no question that this guy deserves the next title shot against Israel Adesanya. All right, next segment that I want to discuss is in regards to a fighter that I was not surprised by their performance. So let's go ahead and jump into that segment. And this segment is called...
Hey, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers.
Nate Diaz says he's not surprised. And there was actually, I want to include 2 fighters in this I'm not surprised segment. First fighter, it has to be Khabib. The man is undefeated, 29-0. He just retired. I talked about him a lot in the Hot Ball segment that started off this Flying Knee KO podcast. But you gotta give it to him, because even though you get presented these promos where the contender, in this case Justin Gaethje, they make it seem like he's got a chance. And every fighter has a puncher's chance. I gave Justin Gaethje pretty good percentage. I was thinking, yeah, if he's able to land and if he's able to at least stuff a few takedowns and try to push it to the later rounds, and if he can keep up his stamina, he's going to have a good shot. Maybe he can push it to a decision. Very unlikely that he would finish Khabib just because of his great chin, but you never knew. Even with that, even though you know Khabib's game plan, you know he's going to take every fighter down. It's the same game plan through and through, and you still can't stop him. He is an unstoppable force. You can't be surprised by the performance that he put on. You can't be surprised by the finish, because that's how skilled he is. Not only can he land heavy punches like he did on Conor McGregor or Dustin Poirier, but he can also finish on the ground. He's an elite jiu-jitsu specialist. It's just unbelievable. His wrestling, his sambo wrestling, is one of the greatest tools that we've ever seen in the UFC. So, gotta give your hat off to Khabib, because you were not surprised by his performance, because how much of a beast he was. But the second individual that I wanted to include was actually Lauren Murphy. Lauren Murphy from the flyweight division just had a great performance as she ended up taking on Lilia Shakirova. And now, she was supposed to face Cynthia Calvillo, but Calvillo got into a situation with COVID, so they had to scrap that fight. So they had Lilia Shakirova come in, make her UFC debut, and face off against a tough Lauren Murphy. Now, Shakirova had an 8-2 record. All of those victories were outside of the UFC organization, but she was a skilled striker. But that did not stop Lauren Murphy from putting on a heck of a performance. She ended up getting a rear naked choke in the second round and just completely dominated every moment and every aspect of that fight. With that victory, Lauren ended up getting on a 4-fight win streak, which is the most in the flyweight division other than Valentina Shevchenko, who is the champion. But Lauren Murphy, again, as soon as that fight started, you could see that, okay, she's trying to adjust, having to not only adjust her game plan, because imagine going through a camp thinking you're going to fight Cynthia Calvillo, and instead, on a week's notice, you get switched to a different opponent that you've never even seen, don't have enough time to study for. So she had to kind of quickly adjust, try to download her information. And Shakirova, at the beginning did really good. She was moving around in the cage, not wanting to stay in one static position. But Lauren Murphy, as soon as she got her hands on her, was able to bring her down to the floor, get the takedown, get into a nice position, take the back, and then slip in that nice little arm under the chin and choke out Shakirova. It was just great performance, and it was actually Lauren Murphy's first submission victory in her UFC career. So great job to Lauren Murphy. I was not surprised because of how tough she has been in this flyweight division. And like I mentioned, on a 4-fight win streak. So she's looking to hopefully get a title shot in the near future. All right, now from talking about fighters that we weren't surprised by the performance, such as Lauren Murphy or Khabib Nurmagomedov, I want to jump over to the segment where we talk about a fighter that we were surprised of in the segment that is actually called...
Who the fuck is that guy? Who the fuck is that? You know damn well who I am. Who the fuck is that?
Who the F is that guy is the name of this segment, and this is where we choose an individual that fought on the main card where we want to shine a spotlight on him. We want to know, you know what? There's a lot of crazy stuff going on, like Robert Whittaker, Lauren Murphy, or Khabib Nurmagomedov retiring, that some fighters end up getting passed by. So this individual is actually Phil Hawes. He's the middleweight up-and-comer, and he gave the fans a show in his pay-per-view debut as he ended his fight in just 18 seconds with a knockout of Jacob Malkoun. You know that these guys that come from, he actually comes from the Dana White Contender Series, so usually, prospects that come from that show are heavy hitters or guys that are really good on the ground that finish the fight. That's what Dana's looking for. He's looking for guys that are going to be, guys and girls, that are going to be putting on shows, and that's exactly what Phil Hawes did. He did not disappoint. He immediately, as soon as the fight started, got in front of Malkoun, pressured him along the cage, waited for the perfect opportunity, and then as soon as both guys started exchanging, you see a nice little slick right hand that slips past the guard of Malkoun that rocks him right on the chin, and then as soon as you see him stumble to his knees, ends up being a 3-punch combination by Phil Hawes with the right, left, and then another right that ends up dropping him, face-planting Malkoun to the floor and the canvas, and he ends up landing one more hammer fist before the referee jumped in and stopped the fight. Phil Hawes with a great stoppage right there. What better way to start your pay-per-view debut with the UFC than by finishing your fight in 18 seconds? He just made it look so damn easy. And now the middleweight division is looking very good. The future of it, at least. You have guys like Hamzat, now Phil Hawes coming in. It's going to be very interesting to see. Hopefully Izzy's able to battle and face these new contenders and see how he's going to be able to stay on top. But for the moment, let's shine the spotlight on Phil Hawes, who got an 18-second knockout over Jacob Malkoun. Well done, young man, and I can't wait to see you again in the near future. All right, everybody, final segment of this Flying Knee KO podcast. And for this segment, I like to kind of predict what's next for the winners of the main card of UFC 254. Just again, fantasy booking, bias. This is not something that I'm saying, yep, this is 100% guaranteed going to happen. Nope, all of these have been wrong so far from my understanding or my remembering of these specific segments or actual bookings that I've made on this podcast. But I like to do them anyway. So let's jump into the segment that I like to call...
It's a whole little ball game when they get hit by me. So I said I'd knock him out in the first round, and I knocked him out in the first round. You can call me Mystic Mac because I predict these things.
Mystic Mac is the name of this final segment. And like I alluded to before I went into the segment, I'm just going to go ahead and choose some of the fighters on the main card and try to predict what's next for them. So let's start off with the individual that I actually mentioned in the fourth segment in the, who the F is that guy? Phil Hawes. He's got a 9-2 record already in his MMA career. Finished off his opponent in 18 seconds. So I wouldn't be surprised if he fights again this year. Like I mentioned, he's very early on in his UFC career, but I would very much like to see him get pitted against Puna Soriano, who's currently undefeated in the UFC at 7-0, and he got a knockout in his last fight. So why not put two guys that are coming off of victories, looking to try to show off some action and try to finish off fights really quickly. So I'd like to see Phil Hawes against Puna Soriano. All right, next fighter I'm going to go over is Lauren Murphy. She was featured in the I'm Not Surprised segment. And like I mentioned, she ended up securing her 4th victory in a row, her first submission finish. So congratulations to Lauren Murphy. And, what could be next is a title shot. I mean, Valentina's already fighting against Jennifer Maia next month. So she could wait for that opportunity to fight for the title if Valentina is able to get through Maya. But if she wants to take one more fight, why not face off against Jessica Andrade, who just made her flyweight debut last week, got a finish over Caitlin Chookagian, who was the number 1 contender in that flyweight division. And now you pit Andrade against Lauren Murphy. Both ladies now trying to vie for a chance to face off against Valentina Shevchenko. It's a number 1 contender fight, and I'm all in for it. Let's do it. I'm hoping the UFC can at least book that one in the next couple of months. All right, next fighter is the co-main event winner, Robert Whittaker. I teased it, in the prior segment. I'm pretty sure everybody saw that coming, but there's nowhere else for Robert Whittaker to go. There's no need to give him somebody below him. He is the clear number 1 contender, and his path leads right back to Israel Adesanya. I know a lot of people might disagree. They think that, hey, well, you got knocked out in the second round against Izzy in their first fight. What's going to change? But, Robert and his team are very technical, and they're a very intelligent group. So I can totally see them changing up everything from that game plan that they had in the first fight against Izzy and try to throw him something completely different. Robert Whittaker, even in the post-fight press conference, ended up saying, it's a tough fight. He's already dreading having to try to game plan for Izzy because he knows how hard it's going to be, but he's up to the challenge. Right now, he said that he wants to kind of enjoy the holidays with his family and then think about fighting in 2021. And much respect to him. He deserves to have that time off. He fought 2 tough victories over guys like Darren Till and Jared Cannonier. So yeah, I'm so excited for this rematch because I like both guys. I like Robert Whittaker and Israel Adesanya. And I would love to see what type of a strategy Robert and his team try to pull off in this rematch, or how they can try to, again, avoid falling into those traps that Adesanya likes to put on his opponents. Do I think he'll win? I'm not quite sure, but I very much see that fight playing very differently in the rematch, and I can't wait to see that one hopefully get made. And it'd be even better if it was in Australia. That way, again, you get the fans from New Zealand and Australia to, obviously, you don't know what's going to happen with this COVID situation, but maybe by that time they can at least allow some fans to go. That way you can have some type of interaction for the Australia fans and the New Zealand fans who love Robert Whittaker and Israel Adesanya. All right, and now the last prediction that I want to make. This one's tough because Khabib retired. Originally, how I do this segment is the main event winner. I choose what's next for them. If it's a champion, who's the next contender? But in this case, Khabib ends up retiring. So what I want to do is actually predict what's going to happen with that lightweight title. Who's going to fight for it? And here's my idea. I did not come up with it. I completely saw it on Reddit, and I'm pretty sure you've seen it everywhere on Instagram as well. But I would be so down if the UFC made a lightweight tournament to determine the new lightweight champion. My gosh, how incredible would that be? It doesn't even have to be like this tournament has to be all the guys in one night. You could split it up into different either pay-per-views or fight nights, but having some type of a tournament where guys have to win in order to move on closer and closer to that championship would be incredible and some must-see TV. I would include 6 to 8 guys, and some of the matchups that I'd be down to see. One of them is already probably going to be made in January, which is Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier. Both guys rematching now after several years of facing off in the featherweight division. Now you have an improved Dustin Poirier who wants to get, again, revenge against the one loss that he had against Conor McGregor. And that really was the catapult of starting getting Conor McGregor more and more noticed. That would be one of the first matchups. Then I would also have Tony Ferguson come back and face off against the newcomer in Michael Chandler, the former Bellator lightweight champion. What an incredible sight to see between those two guys. Tony Ferguson trying to see if he can rebound after his first loss in over 7 years. And against Michael Chandler, who wants to prove that, Bellator, it's not just a bunch of chumps over there. There's a lot of killers in that organization. He wants to prove that his skill set can be the top of the top in this UFC organization as well. Next couple of matchups, I would actually put Justin Gaethje against Dan Hooker. Two savages that know nothing more than to just stand in the pocket and exchange as best they can. Dan Hooker and Dustin Poirier put on a crazy performance early on this year, and I would not be surprised if Justin versus Dan Hooker would be fight of the year if they fight next year. Last matchup, in the last two guys in the rankings, I would put Charles Oliveira against Paul Felder. Oliveira getting overlooked a lot. He's already on a 7-fight win streak in the toughest division in the UFC. So now he just needs one more name. He needs a couple more names to add to the resume. That way he can get a clear shot at the title. And what better way to do it than in a tournament against those guys where your name is now showing against the likes of Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, or even Tony Ferguson. Again, just an idea and a thought. I didn't come up with it. I wish I did. But I'm really hoping the UFC does something like this to put some excitement into crowning a new champion. It'd be something very new. And I'm pretty sure everybody is now waiting to see who is going to be the new lightweight king that's going to replace Khabib Nurmagomedov. All right, everybody. That's all the segments that I wanted to talk about on episode 13 of the Flying Knee KO podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you guys are free this Saturday, it is Halloween, but there is also a fight night that Saturday. And it's actually going to be Anderson Silva versus Uriah Hall. Should be an interesting matchup. And it is also going to be Anderson Silva's last fight in the UFC. So if you're a fan of the Spider, make sure to check that out on Halloween this Saturday. Guys, if you have any questions or any comments, please make sure to put those in the YouTube comments below. I'll take any feedback to try to improve this podcast. Again, just trying to do my best to exert all the emotions I had for the sport that I really love and I'm starting to learn more about. But thank you so much, guys. I appreciate you listening. And make sure to tune in next week for episode 14 of the Flying Knee KO podcast. Have a great week, guys.